said, fine, go right ahead with your investigation. I didn't stop there. I called in Haldeman Ehrlichman. I said, we cannot have a cover-up. He said, I want to stop this. Be sure that the word gets out to everybody to continue. What I am saying here, yes, we considered the possibility, and I had hoped, for example, that the CIA would find that they didn't want the investigation to go forward. But when I was informed that they were not concerned about us going forward, I didn't hesitate one bit.
When the House Judiciary Committee voted to impeach the President of the United States, the President of the United States was relaxing out in California.
I was swimming in the Pacific at a beach. As a matter of fact, it's called the Red Beach. It's the Marine Corps landing beach where they practice their amphibious landing. One of the great beaches of the world. And when I came in, the phone rang in the trailer in which I was changing my clothes. And I put on my windbreaker with the presidential seal on, picked up the phone, and Ron Ziegler informed me that the Judiciary Committee had voted, as I had expected then, by a margin, with all three Southern Democrats voting for impeachment. That meant, in other words, there was no question that the full House would vote for impeachment. I didn't have any particular feeling about it, though I was prepared for it. I expected it.
So as you flew back to Washington from San Clemente, you had no hope whatever that you would survive as president for more than a matter of days or weeks or months at most?
From the 23rd of July on, I knew that we could not survive. However, when I got back to Washington, in my usual methodical way, people think it's methodical, and I guess it is, I decided I should put down the pros and cons of what options I had. And I had a sheet of paper on that which refreshed my memory. Rather interesting when I read it today, so many years later. It indicated, 1, I could resign now. 2, I could wait until the House voted impeachment and resign then. Or 3, I could, despite the House voting impeachment, go to trial in the Senate, which would take about 6 months. Now, resigning now was the option I didn't want to do above everything else, personally. I'm a fighter. I just didn't want to quit. Also, I thought it would be an admission of guilt, which of course it was. And also, I felt that it would set a terribly bad precedent for the future. I hope no other president ever resigns under any circumstances. The second option was no option at all, to wait until the House voted impeachment, because what I would do then would be to put all of my good supporters on the spot and make them vote for impeachment, which they didn't want to do. You don't put them through that sort of thing. The third option, go through the Senate with a hearing, a trial, I should say, for 6 months. I knew that that was unacceptable. Unacceptable because from the standpoint of the country couldn't afford to have a crippled, half-time president. Particularly in this time when I recalled that in 1973, when things weren't as bad as they were now, the Soviet Union at that time was very difficult during that 73 war in the Mideast. I just couldn't risk it, I felt. So after making those notes, I, in my own mind, decided, well, there's no choice. And so the next day, on the first day of August, this was a week before I finally made my resignation speech, I got in Haig and Ziegler, and I told them that I felt that there was no choice but to resign. So the next day, I had to tell the family. It was a painful day. I remember going over to the White House in the evening, and I was sitting in the Lincoln sitting room, reading a few things, working on some correspondence and other things that simply had piled up and had to be acted upon. And Tricia came into the room. And I remember when she came in, it sort of reminded me of other times she'd come in. She had a way during the years before she was married of sometimes just coming in the room when I would be working or reading there and just sitting. She wouldn't talk, she wouldn't say anything. We kind of communicated in silence. That was her way, and it was mine. She just wanted to be near me when things were good, or as a matter of fact, when they were tough. And so she came in, and I said, well, I decided that we're going to have to resign for the good of the country. And I said, she interrupted me. She says, for the good of the country, you must not resign. She's pretty firm, despite her rather fragile, frail appearance. And after I said, no, I'm afraid it has to be done, And then, unlike Julie, she has a very great problem controlling her. She has no problem in controlling her emotions. She controls them very well. And she sort of got up, and she came over to me, put her arms around me, kissed me in the forehead, tears coming into her eyes, and she said, "You're the most decent man I've ever known." And I said, "Well, I just hope I haven't let you down." But I knew I had.
Mr. Nixon then told the rest of the family, and son-in-law Edward Cox, Tricia's husband, spoke up.
Eddie Cox made a very interesting observation. He said, "No," he said, "you've got to realize that today the most important function the president has in the field of foreign policy. And even though you would be crippled," agreed, "and could serve only half time, with your experience, that would be better than having Ford." He felt Ford was very competent, but he said he had no experience, or not as much experience in foreign policy. And then I went on to say, "Well, but you'll have Kissinger. He'll be there." He says, "Look, Kissinger's brilliant, but mark my word, unless he has somebody with him who knows as much as he does and will back him up, he won't be as effective." Well, under the circumstances, that sort of finished that subject. We decided to go to think it over and go to Camp David for the weekend.
It must have been a very eerie weekend at Camp David with all of you there with this enormous thing hanging over you, knowing that the decision had been made.
It was an eerie weekend. Well, we saw a movie, and we took a walk on the paths up there.
Do you remember what the movie was?
I don't remember the movie, no. I didn't much care for the movies. They were just a good way to relax. It wasn't Patton. It was something else. I think something one of the girls had picked. So when we got back to Washington, we decided that night to go out for one last ride on the Sequoia. That also was a rather eerie ride, I may say. We talked about everything but what Tricia has called, quote, the subject, end quote.
The morning after that boat ride, Mr. Nixon attended a scheduled cabinet meeting. He said nothing about his decision to resign. Only the family and a few very close aides knew about it. But Secretary of Defense James Schlesinger had certain misgivings.
Are you aware that after this cabinet meeting, Secretary of Defense Schlesinger went back to the Pentagon and met with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and then issued an order that no alert or alert of American forces could be declared without his counter-signature, and he's since said it was because, or it's since been said that he said, was because he feared your stability and that you would either use a foreign crisis to maintain yourself in office or that you would use domestic troops in order to retain yourself in office, in effect a coup.
Incredible.
Why did he think that, though?
I don't know. I don't know. I have great respect for him. I appointed him to several very important positions, as everybody knows. But I can't understand why he would do that, because that just isn't the way I'd operate. There was nothing in my mind whatever like that. The afternoon after the cabinet meeting, I had Haig and Ziegler come over, and I said, "Well, the things are moving very fast now. I think that we should do it on Thursday." And I then proceeded to give several suggestions with regard to the content of the resignation speech, passed them on to Ray Price. Things were moving very fast.
This was on the Tuesday afternoon?
This was the Tuesday afternoon. And I said to General Haig that I would resign, but it would be with dignity and with no rancor. And he said, "You will be as worthy, your exit," he said, "will be as worthy as your opponents are unworthy." And then I thought a minute, and I said, "Well, Al, I really screwed it up, didn't I?" He didn't have to answer.
What was the family dinner like that night, Tuesday night?
Very quiet. We didn't talk that much about the situation. Let me say Mrs. Nixon was very perceptive, however. I learned later that after our night on the Sequoia, that even though they hadn't been officially told that the decision was final, she had started to sort the clothes and start the packing. Incidentally, for 3 days, from Monday night until we left on Friday morning. She didn't sleep at all, packing 5.5 years of clothes and other mementos preparatory to leaving. With us, sometimes, as it is between people that are very close, you don't have to say it publicly or even privately. Things unspoken say it even more strongly.
You've said that Mrs. Nixon was reading the book, or excerpts from the Woodward Bernstein book, The Final Days, when she had her stroke, or you've been reported as saying that. Is that true?
Oh, yes.
Do you see any cause and effect there?
I couldn't give a medical opinion, but my gut reaction is that it had an enormous impact. Certainly, as far as I'm concerned, I have nothing but contempt for them.
One of the most memorable and subsequently controversial events of these days was your meeting with Henry Kissinger that night, which ended in your praying with him in the Lincoln bedroom. Do you remember that night?
Oh, I remember it very well. And he remembers it very well, too, because he's written about it, as I have. What happened is that he came over, and we had to discuss the sending of messages to people around the world we dealt with. I wanted to assure them all that President Ford was a strong man, that he had my total confidence, and that he supported our foreign policy. And so we worked in some of those messages, and then we reminisced about some of the great events of the past. We reminisced, for example, about particularly the meeting in that very room 3 years before, when we got the message about the trip to China. And so I walked down the hall to the kitchen, and the same bottle of Courvoisier that we had toasted from 3 years ago when we got that historic news, I found that. Nobody had drunk any out of it since then. I brought it back with a couple of snifter glasses, and we proposed the toast not just to the past, but to the future. I must say, we weren't quite as elated this time as we were. And Henry, in his rather gruff way, but very sincere way, he said, if they continue to harass you, he said, I will resign, and I will tell the reason why. And then I started to escort him out, and almost by emotion, right next to the Lincoln sitting room is the Lincoln bedroom, which incidentally used to be the cabinet room at one point, or the office. And I said, Henry, just wait a minute here. I said, on special occasions in times past, for example, before we went to China, before I had a major speech or a major press conference, before we went to Russia, I would stop in this room and have a moment of silent prayer, because I just sort of gathered strength just from being in this room where Lincoln had been. And I asked him to join me, and we knelt quietly in the Quaker fashion for a couple of seconds, got up, I escorted him out. A few minutes later, I felt a little embarrassed about it because I thought he might have been embarrassed. And I called on the phone. I said, Henry, you know, that was a very private matter, and I hope it didn't embarrass you. He says, not at all. He said, this isn't going to leak. Of course it did. I was not surprised.
Were you hurt?
Nope. I was beyond the point of being hurt then.
Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States, became the first ever to resign that office. He did it on the night of August 8, 1974, in a televised address to the nation. And afterwards, he went back to his family. Among them was son-in-law David Eisenhower.
I went upstairs, and all the family was gathered in the West Hall. And as I came in, David said, I don't see how you did it. I don't see how you did it, because he had seen the text in advance. And then suddenly they all got up, and they came around, just surrounded me. It was sort of a huddle, sort of a family embrace, saying nothing and saying everything. And then Tricia said, Daddy, said, you're wet. Your coat's wet through. And I began to have a chill. And what had happened was that the room had been so hot, and the tension was so great that I was perspiring clear through the suit. The same suit, incidentally, that I had worn when I had gone to Moscow and spoken on television to the Russian people just in 1970. Away, and I went down. down to the Lincoln Room and made a few calls to people. Heard the chanting outside. Reminded me of the Vietnam days, except this time the chant was "Jail to the Chief, jail to the Chief." Didn't bother me, however. You know, after all, I'd been heckled by experts.
There was one last official act to be done. It could only be done by the president.
Al Haig sort of knocked on the door. I think it was perhaps for him the most difficult meeting we had, and for me it wasn't easy. He brought one piece of paper. There was one line on it. He said, "You know, we forgot to do this. Would you sign it now? I hereby resign the office of President of the United States." I signed it. He took it out.
How did you feel as you signed that one-sentence letter to the Secretary of State resigning the presidency of the United States?
I didn't have any special feeling about it then because I was so numb.
Did you use any special pen to sign it?
No. Just one of my pens from my pocket.
What do you recall?
It wasn't one of those cases where I wanted a special pen, as we do for bills and so forth and hand them out. I wasn't about, if somebody had suggested a special pen, they would have found their tails right outside that room, and Haig had the good sense not to bring in a special pen. Of course, what they would have wanted me to use 50 special pens and give replicas of the pens or the actual signing pens to the members of the House Judiciary Committee, and I wasn't about to do that.
Finally, it was over. The Nixons were going home, back to California.
There's the president waving goodbye, and you hear the applause.
I closed my eyes. I was pretty tired then. Been up all night, thinking, so forth. And as the helicopter began to rise, I heard Mrs. Nixon, who was sitting in the seat next to us, speaking to no one in particular, but to everyone. And she said, "It's so sad. It's so sad."
These Nixon memoirs conclude next Sunday on 60 Minutes, with Mr. Nixon discussing money and the Kennedys.
Miles didn't kill these trucks. They died of exposure.
We are Dodge, and this is how we build our truck.
With more rust-fighting galvanized steel than any top-selling full-size pickup, and America's longest no-extra-cost factory rust-through protection truck warranty. 5 years or 100,000 miles on all 84 full-size pickups and Ram Chargers.
We are Dodge.
Now get $500 cash back on all 250 and 350 pickups.
Mommy beat Daddy.
I quit.
Sore loser. Yvonne, how do you do it? Tennis, family, everything.
Isn't easy. And after Morgan was born, my doctor told me I had iron poor blood.
You?
Biggest nutritional problem we women have. Now I protect myself, eat right, and take Geritol every day.
Geritol is iron-rich. Great protection against iron-poor blood. Iron is Geritol's middle name.
Should I take Geritol?
Yvonne does.
It's great protection against iron poor blood.
Till now, to get really fresh-tasting spaghetti sauce,
I don't know how you do it, Bob.
you had to grow your own vegetables. Introducing Ragu Chunky Garden-Style Spaghetti Sauces. The chunkiest, freshest-tasting sauces we ever put in a jar. Bursting with the garden-fresh taste of chunky tomatoes, tender mushrooms, crunchy green peppers, sweet onions.
I don't know how you do it, Vinny.
New Ragu Chunky Garden Style in 3 varieties. That's Italian.
You are.
Coming up next, a report by Bill Curtis on the most poignant new marchers in the American Parade.
Years ago.
Yeah.
That's right.
Tonight, in the exciting continuation of George Washington, the tide of revolution rises, and George finds himself at odds with his best friend.
Dire consequences shall be on your heads.
But the march of history calls George to his destiny as the struggle for freedom begins tonight in Part 2 of George Washington.
This is CBS.
The world is looking for a standard it can trust. More stable than gold, as strong as the dollar. Value. This is today's standard of value. Honda, holding its value year after year after year. Value in mileage. Value in quality. Affordable. The world standard for today is value, and that value is Honda. At your Sun Country Honda dealer.
The final clearance of Ace Home Furnishings remodeling sale takes place tomorrow with a big 12-hour sale, 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. This is the final markdown. Everything must go to make way for all new merchandise coming in. Make big savings on sofas, sofa sleepers, recliners, dinette sets, wall units, and really low prices on famous brand TVs and appliances. Tomorrow, the big 12-hour sale, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. at Ace Home Furnishings. Terms, bank cards welcome.
It could be a typical Vietnamese scene, but when the Buddhist temple is in Chicago, it becomes very American. A mixture of cultures, East and West, like this little girl, whose mother is Vietnamese and father American. Pearl Buck called such a blending of races Amerasian, a beautiful but often tragic mixture. In Vietnam, it was a curse.
Ở bên Sài Gòn thì đi học. When I went to school in Saigon, I had to deal a lot with the other kids. They always make fun of me and say to me things like this: "Oh, you, the product of America. You better go back to America."
And what about your skin? Did they say you were black American?
Người ta có kỳ thị cái màu da của con hay không? Người ta có nói là con có bị đen cái nọ hay không? Có, nó chửi rồi tùm lum đó. Yes, they insult me because of my color of my skin.
She was left behind in 1975, along with thousands of other Amerasian children, when the North Vietnamese swept the South. It wasn't until 1980 that they were discovered again, among the street children of Saigon, children with American faces.
What do you hope and dream about and want to be when you grow up in America?
The first thing is to see my father.
But most of the 1,000 Amerasian children who have come in the last 2 years have had no father waiting, like Lê Hong Ian, who came in December.
Ian, do you remember anything about your father?
Con còn nhớ gì về ba con không? Dạ nhớ.
What?
Yes, I do remember. Con nhớ những cái gì? Con nhớ ba con là. I think about my father, and I wish that I could find him, and so I would be like the other child I had my father.
If that is the dream of every child left behind in Vietnam, and it could be the nightmare of their fathers, who returned more than 9 years ago to start new lives and new families here in the United States. As many as 20,000 children were left behind. They are now coming with their mothers at the rate of 300 a month. The Amerasian children began to trickle in 1982. Legislation was passed that year admitting those identified by their fathers as U.S. citizens. The reunions were happy ones.
Words can't possibly describe it. She turned out even better than I expected. She's a perfect lady.
And in that spirit, the State Department started allowing Amerasians in as refugees on the basis of Vietnamese lists. It's believed the Vietnamese government is now actively seeking out American-looking children and their families to move them out of Vietnam. And so the floodgates opened. Travel is paid for by the U.S. government in the form of an interest-free loan. And they settle in communities like this one in Chicago on public assistance. This is Argyle Street, a Vietnamese community where the smell of fish sauce brings back memories of Tudo Street in Saigon.
It was another world. American men went to war. Some found an escape, and some fell in love.
I had hundreds of friends who had live-in maids or girlfriends or formed alliances.
Bill Bray worked in Vietnam for 7 years as a government contractor and brought his Laotian wife and Amerasian child to the U.S. when he left in 1972.
What was the attitude of the military to this?
Strongly against. You had to get permission to marry, and it was strongly discouraged by the military.
What about living with a Vietnamese woman?
Among non-commissioned officers and career soldiers, it was the way of life. I think that many of them saw it as a temporary alliance and planned to leave and planned to abandon her all along. I don't think the women thought that at all. I mean, once they had a child by him, they thought they had him forever.
Now, you're Gary. You came in July. That's right. And you are... That's right. And you are... The Lambergs of North Lauderdale, Florida, have 9 children under the age of 14. 6 of them are Amerasian. 3 were left behind in 1975 with their Vietnamese mother. But when Donna Lamberg heard they had been abandoned in Saigon, she encouraged Jerry to get them out. They arrived in July 1983.
These children were like pieces out of a puzzle that were missing, and when they came in, it was like the puzzle was completed.
Both Donna and Jerry Lamberg felt a responsibility to the children, even though it has brought financial hardship. His $700 a month Army pension barely covers the rent, the car payments, and the utilities. Everything else comes from his lawn maintenance job at $6 an hour, when he can work.
I know there's a lot of American fathers here that have children that don't want to admit it. But there's a lot of people here that probably would adopt these children if they can get the help to bring these children out. That's all that's needed.
The Lambergs have given their children security in an all-American setting and love. But for the majority of Amerasian children, the setting is different. They are clustered by resettlement agencies near Vietnamese communities. Although Ian and her Amerasian friends are learning a new language, much of their time is spent in a Vietnamese world, where children of mixed race are discriminated against, so they tend to cling to other Amerasian families.
We have to keep the blame on the individual man, primarily. But there's a sense of societal guilt, and these guys went over there involuntarily, and probably a lot of them rationalize it that way, that they did not want to go to Vietnam in the first place. They were sent there, and they made the best out of a bad situation, and that it's not their fault or not their responsibility.
But what is the responsibility of the American man whose life could be drastically changed by an unexpected letter or phone call? It's a question many will face as the mothers and children continue to arrive from Vietnam.
The last time I saw my husband is at 3 o'clock, the 23rd of November, 1974. If I saw my husband right now, the first thing I say that I raised his child for 14 years. And I want him to know what a trouble I went through as a woman without a husband.
We found the man named by Ian's mother. He said he didn't want to talk about the past. There are so many stories we want to tell you. On Tuesday nights ahead, we plan to tell you about American soldiers of fortune in El Salvador, and about Andy Rooney's adventures aboard the great gray aircraft carrier Guam.
Bailey, what do his friends call him, F? I love people with names like that.
About 2 people who, oddly enough, have something in common. Opera singer Brenda Boozer and comedian Robert Klein are married. It's quite a marriage. Those are among the marchers in our coming parades. This one isn't over quite yet. I'll be right back.
Why American business trusts Emery.
When my designs are late, buyers don't give us a second chance. Emery's international service goes door to door, fast.
Emery delivers all our tapes to the networks, because if they're not there, they don't get on air. And guess who pays for it?
Sending hundreds of contracts across the country is a huge responsibility. We share that responsibility with Emery.
Over 1 million customers trust Emery to deliver. Call Emery. We've earned the trust of American business.
No, it's just my
keys. Can you empty all of your keys? Wait a minute, Stu, do you have the traveler's checks?
No.
No?
I thought you had
I can see. I can't find it.
It was your keys.
Yeah, fine. Thank you.
What's the problem?
We've lost our traveler's checks.
You can get a refund to the American Express machine down the hall.
No,
But they weren't. They weren't American Express.
Oh, they weren't. What time's your flight?
You know, nobody but American Express can give refunds to traveler's check machines in most major U.S. airports. Don't leave home without...
The Shell Oil Company announces its new gold standard in gasoline. New SU-2000 Super Unleaded Gasoline. So unique, it's patented. SU-2000 is designed to reduce critical intake deposits that may be causing engine knock. It helps keep your engine clean mile after mile. New SU-2000, a gasoline designed for the way you drive today and tomorrow. High-octane SU-2000, Shell's new gold standard in gasoline.
This week's notes from the American Almanac. The sun rose 48 minutes earlier this American morning than it did a month ago and set 32 minutes later. The days are growing longer. This Sunday is Palm Sunday, and just as the sun goes down, a full moon will rise. Sometimes people in cities are too busy to notice full moons. People in open spaces like West Texas, where we saw this one, always notice. And sometimes even take a minute to look up and admire the sight. The full moon returns this weekend. This is a week of returning. The dogwood blossoms are returning to Georgia and the Carolinas. The warblers are returning to Kentucky. The purple martins are returning to Sapulpa, Oklahoma. The returns are returning to Andover, Massachusetts. They come in a flock in this week of April every year. This is their spring nesting ground, the regional center of the IRS. The returns have been wintering in desk drawers and shoeboxes, but this week, as if answering some call, they fly in by the millions like flights of geese to be tagged and tracked in their spring migration. They'll all be in by Monday, except for a few stragglers. Who was it who said, "I think we have more machinery of government than is necessary"? That's right. It was Jefferson. We have him on a pedestal in Washington. This week we gave his pedestal a spring cleaning. The cherry blossoms have returned to the tidal basin beside the little Greek temple we built for Jefferson to stand in. Away to the west, on the small mountain where he built his house, Jefferson once got a letter from a man in Massachusetts asking to know his birthday so it could be celebrated. Jefferson wrote back that he felt the birthday of the country was the only one that ought to be celebrated. Therefore, he said, "I have always declined letting my own birthday be known." But the date got out. It is April 13th, next Friday, if you want to celebrate it. Jefferson loved this time of year at Monticello. In his retirement up here, he wrote, "Though an old man, I am but a young gardener." The youngest Virginia gardener we noticed this week was Amy Cadmus. She spent her Saturday in fields of daffodils with her mother and brother and grandma and grandpa, taking part in the most beautiful harvest of the spring. The daffodils are inherited from the old Tidewater bulb planters. Their legacy pays its dividends in April.
Most of these flowers have been here about 35 years. Have never been dug. We only fertilize them once a year if they're lucky, and God does the rest.
Amy's grandmother and grandfather, Granville and Betty Hall, are at this every April through good times and bad. Granville Hall says no Gloucester County daffodil grower will admit to any motive other than profit. But he adds, with a glance at Amy, "I think there are other things of value to this. And besides, there isn't much profit." We found we envied them the chance to walk in the sun, wrapping rubber bands around beauty. The flowers they picked on Saturday you can buy tonight in the flower stalls of New York. If you wonder where they came from the arms of Amy. One more American week gone by. The parade continues. We'll be here watching it again next Tuesday. Good night.
I'm proud to say that my teeth have lived as long as I have. When I was 25, my dentist told me flossing every day is one of the best ways to fight gum disease. That's the main reason adults lose their teeth. I've used Johnson & Johnson for 50 years. Some of my friends never thought flossing was important. Now they have nothing to floss.
Johnson & Johnson is recognized by the American Dental Association. It's your strongest line of defense against gum disease.
Don't risk losing your teeth.
Make every document the same size.
Charts in color.
Figures in blue.
Headings in black. And collated.
This job is for a multiple-choice copier, the Canon NP155. Its zoom system makes a full range of enlargements and reductions, up to 15 copies a minute in black, brown, or blue, and can collate.
Don, do I know how to pick a value?
Yes. Yes.
Canon's NP155 gives you more for less. For information, call toll-free.
Allied gives you peace of mind. Sensitive moves, custom designed.
Relax.
Let your future ride with Allied.
For over 50 years, Allied Van Lines has moved you worry-free.
Relax. Let your future ride with Allied.
Today, Allied custom designs all kinds of sensitive moves all over the world. Relax.
Let your future ride with Allied.
Allied Van Lines, designing moves to fit your needs.
Friday on the news, a jealous jeweler steals some...
Ooh.
And the boys use two darling decoys to catch the crooks. Then on Dallas.
I played the tape for Bobby. He'll never marry you.
I'll kill you, JR.
As he used Catherine for the last time. And on Falcon Crest, Philip proposes.
Say you'll marry me? I think I will.
We've got the touch Friday.
In crowded Singapore, the government is urging the bright to breed. Is Big Brother on the march? The story tomorrow on the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Thursday.
Might be kind of fun having an English butler.
Can Magnum save Higgins?
You must win.
Then Simon and Simon get hit.
Wow.
To help a DJ in distress. And you're invited to spend a spectacular hour with Diana Ross and her guests, Michael Jackson, Larry Hagman, and Quincy Jones. Diana's got the touch. Thursday.
Good evening from CBS News. This is Newsbreak. Another big primary win tonight for Walter Mondale. He's captured 46% of the vote in Pennsylvania. Gary Hart is second, Jesse Jackson a distant third. Mondale is again the solid front runner. Hart says he hopes to regain the momentum in the Western contest. Now this.
Don't just ask for...
President Reagan was dealt a severe setback by the Senate tonight by a vote of 84 to 12. The Senate passed a resolution that declared the United States should not be involved in the mining of Nicaraguan ports. The vote came as the administration sought to douse the political brush fires that erupted when the secret mining program was revealed. A success for the Space Shuttle Challenger. With the retrieval of a malfunctioning solar satellite today, astronaut Terry Hart used the shuttle's robot arm to capture the satellite and lift it into the cargo bay. I'm Jerry Bowen, CBS News Los Angeles.